We will now bring our next panelist to the stage. So actually on this session, we have two back-to-back panels. Our next panelist will come on up for us. Hopefully we'll catch the jingle at just the right moment this time, and I'll invite you all up on stage at once, please. So we have Akira, Kevin, and Kamna. Please welcome to the stage. A seat. You've got some water there in front of you as well. All right, so I'm going to give a brief introduction of our panelists. I'm going to keep it as brief as possible so we can get as much value and impact out of this discussion as we can. So first, we have Kevin, and I just realized I don't know how to pronounce your last name. Can you tell me, please?
No one does. It's fine. Tayebaly.
Tayebaly? Tayebaly. So Kevin Tayebaly. Kevin spent the first 10 years of his career in strategic consulting, social entrepreneurship, and impact investing. He co-founded ChangeNOW, this very conference, in 2017 to support and elevate thousands of leaders across the globe, to federate and strengthen the global impact ecosystem, to educate and shift mindsets, influence regulation, and accelerate the transition of business. We also have Kamna Hazrati here at the end. Kamna Hazrati started her career in India as an e-commerce entrepreneur and has spent 12 years of her life in this space. When confronted with her own need to fulfill a greater purpose, she founded AndPurpose in 2021, a social impact marketing company working with businesses, CSR funds, and foundations and grants to elevate their reach with the power of marketing, strategy, and impact storytelling. And lastly, but certainly not least, we have somebody who's joining us all the way from New York. So we have two people who flew in, I think just last night, from India and from the United States, respectively. Akira Nakahara is a career-long narrative strategist and the CEO of Imperative 21, a global network of organizations building narrative power for a just economy. This summer, in collaboration with the Kennan Institute of Ethics at Duke University, he and his team are launching a season-long series exploring capitalism on the award-winning Seen on Radio podcast, which has already been downloaded over 16 million times. Please welcome our esteemed panelists. All right, so summarizing who's in front of us here, we have sort of network, people, events, communication, marketing space folks, okay? We've got a collaborative here. I can't think of better people to explain to us, actually, how can we understand the relationship between systems and narratives? Where do we start?
This could take the entire time. Just that question.
Keep it short if you can.
Maybe I'll kick us off a little bit. Systems and stories are interconnected. Systems don't change until stories do, and stories don't change unless systems do as well. So they are mutually reinforcing. And when we're working with trying to do systems change, we're working within a dominant system, which comes with a dominant story. But often what's happening is that we are working to make the systems change, but the storytelling part of it is not anywhere near as evolved. So we get stuck behind an old story while we're trying to move into a new system. So that creates a lot of tension. So in that sense, as we try to challenge, we have to challenge both. We have to challenge both system and story. And understanding that we need to build a kind of infrastructure that lets us do both of those jobs. And sometimes that's lacking with the storytelling side. So why is it so important? When we think about systems, we have to realize that they're also, as we've heard earlier today, so interconnected, from climate to education, media, business. And therefore, the stories that we tell, the stories that we're in, are also interconnected. And you'll find a thread that the stories that we tell have a lot to say about who we value, who and what we value. And you'll see that within the system and the story. So as we're trying to change the systems, we have to think about what story are we in about who we value and what we value, and how is that translating into the narrative shift. And I think part of that question is also going to how do we use narrative to change systems. And one of the things that narrative can really do is reimagine the story. And by reimagining the story, you can reimagine the system, if we're understanding that they're interconnected the way they are. And one thing that storytelling is really fantastic at is bringing in the emotional weight of what matters. And one example that I can offer, as you just mentioned about the podcast, is our understanding that one of the biggest barriers we have, as we've been talking here about polarized debate, about the tensions within companies to make change happen, is how can we open up space for new conversations? And that's one of the big reasons we wanted to do this podcast. It's to be able to have content, compelling content that has effectively reached lots and lots of people and has already opened up conversations across multiple seasons. John, who's the main producer of this podcast, has done 6 seasons already on race, on patriarchy, on democracy, and really, things that cause a lot of tension in conversation. And what's been really effective of what he's been able to do is he's been able to invite listeners on in a place where get them out of their boxes of what they thought they knew, to be able to kind of rethink or reposition that seed of transformation inside that eventually leads to the potential for external behavior change. So we understand that there needs to be an emotional shift as well as an intellectual one. And one thing that we're really excited about in doing that is that we know through the research that content that is married with community has much stronger ability to create external behavior change. And so we are launching, alongside with this podcast in the fall, these courageous conversation cohorts in the places where polarized conversation is happening, in the places where people are not actually in a brave space yet, to talk about these things and to actually engage with the topics that are coming up with capitalism. And there is a lot of power in origin stories. And so to look at how capitalism has formed, how it's evolved, who's made those choices along the way, what choices are here for us now, what are the possibilities for the future, it's coming from a place of curiosity, a place of in conversation to be able to manage that. And that's the first step of actually opening up the space for the conversation, because ultimately we're trying to bring more people along to what we're doing, and part of that is creating those spaces.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I add up on that?
Yeah.
Are we allowed to?
Yes, of course. Yeah, this is your panel. I'm just here facilitating. Go for it, Kevin. Jump in.
No, I love what you said about reducing the emotional weight of what truly matters. I think that resonates a lot. When we started ChangeNOW and with what we're doing at the moment, we're trying to navigate through complexity and try to embrace that complexity instead of trying to reduce it, and also talk to a very different set of people at the same time. Like you've got the people that are actually already acting, that you find here, but you also have the silent majority that we're trying to make, that we're trying to shift. And there are also the naysayers that we're trying to make irrelevant by the fact that they're not here. And look the party here, look how amazing and look at all the solutions and the incitement. I think the difficulty that we have and that we're trying to solve with the narrative around ChangeNOW is to find a way to talk to this different set of people and to find a way to either help or educate or put aside, and then also trying to show that those topics, they are complex because the world is getting more and more complex. The topics we're trying to cover cannot be solved by one single company. We're going through the same amount of change in 1 year that we used to in one full life a century ago. Because of what was said before, we're in a permanent state of crisis. And we need to try to find narratives that do not scare people. At ChangeNOW, if you look at the way we're organized, you've got the zones with all the different topics, the UN goals, but we are at the same time we're telling you that you cannot solve the climate crisis without talking about women empowerment. You cannot address biodiversity loss without talking about circularity, inclusion, land depletion, and so on and so forth. So the challenge that we have and what we're trying to do here is to organize thoughts in a comprehensive manner, in a holistic manner, but also at the same time show you that everything is interdependent, interconnected, and that you cannot think in silos. We cannot solve the climate crisis just talking about carbon emissions. It won't happen.
I think it's really, really interesting to hear sort of, obviously this is a hugely complex subject and there are different ways to approach it.
Martina, can I just
yes,
add
of course.
one sentence to it? How I think, what Kevin just said, it's more of like a iceberg problem, right? So you see systems at the top, but it's actually a lot of transformative change which happens at the, what you see, but you're not able to see. And that transformative change is actually in the mental models that you have, right? So narratives play a very key role to actually shape those mental models. So if you have to change the system in a sustainable manner, so it doesn't keep breaking yet again, I think it's very important that you look at the mental models, and that's where you work in. And storytelling, narrative building, they all just help you to shape and create those mental model sets. Is what I thought is kind of compiling what both of them were saying. It's kind of an iceberg problem. Yeah.
Definitely. I'm curious as well, how do we actually bring people into a new narrative or a story? I know the power of storytelling is so profound, and it can come from many different spaces. I feel Change Now is a very safe space for people who obviously come here from a certain mindset. I'm wondering as well, actually, how do we bring people in and along to a new vision, a new story, and make it inviting, enticing, interesting, even outside of this space? Any one of you can go ahead.
So how do you really invite people to, I think just what the last panel was saying, right? So it starts from your individual, it also happens at the system level. It's kind of a commitment that you make. So like in my introduction, you said, I was an e-commerce entrepreneur for 12 years. I always had this dream of, working in the impact sector. I never knew how, and I never found the time for it also. So I kept giving myself those excuses. I think by sharing my story here, maybe that is kind of a thing, I feel how people can move from, and from our conversation when we were talking, we were saying, there are a lot of people on the verge of creating that change or bringing that change in their lives. And then there are people who are actually the change makers, right? I think in our room, we have a lot of change makers already, and then there are a couple of us who are just willing to make that change. I, from being an e-commerce entrepreneur, moved to becoming a social impact marketing, company, was with this notion of, that I want to build something which brings impact at scale, which will actually live or, leave a legacy behind, right, what just Chris was saying. So you build companies where, you are actually going to leave a better world behind. So I can say that, okay, this is not my problem, and I can, be happy with it, or I can be more empathetic with the world I'm living around. And systems and narratives are, it's like we are a fish, we are living in a tank, so the environment of the tank really affects us. We might, acknowledge it or not, but it is affecting us. So be it climate change, be it, the way, be it soil or be it agriculture, all these things are affecting the way we live our lives. And just like what Kevin was saying, it's not working in silos, I'm from India, I'm not, everything which happens here, or it's butterfly effect, right? So one butterfly flutters and, the world, it makes a difference in the world. And I think that's what we need to realize. And then be more empathetic to ourselves in that journey and, make that commitment. Maybe that's how you start. Yeah?
Yeah, if I can expand on that, I think with the butterfly, if I don't quote Voltaire, I would say that every snowflake makes the avalanche. So, the way I see it is, when you look at behavioral science, we're all part of the system. We all have a connection to a connection to a connection to a connection that will lead into something new and different. I think to change the mindset and to change the systems when it comes to narratives, you need to understand what are the stories that can impact the people that you have, and to understand that, you need to understand what are the levers you could use to convince people around you. And there are quite a few levers. If you look at it, the first ones are obvious. It's the rational ones. Education, information, knowledge, science. That's what basically gives you a good view of the problem. I think that's what makes you go from collective denial to collective awareness. The problem is that the leaders, and you've heard one just before, they seldomly take a decision based on an IPCC report that they've just read. it doesn't work. So if you want to go to the next step, you need to use other levels than just education or knowledge or data. Then that's when you can use the power of the collective, so collective actions, which basically tell you, hey, look, there's those people that are actually trying to do this new thing, new commitment. It's like the New Year commitments that we enter in. And because it's a group, then you feel more compelled and to follow. The problem is that those are true until they're not anymore. You take a lot of climate pledges at the moment. People are pulling out because, as Chris was saying, at the moment, ESG doesn't have a great momentum in the US and in other regions of the world at the moment. So there's a lot of people leaving, a lot of banks leaving climate pledges in finance. There's even a UK Prime Minister who actually watered down the net zero pledges of the country a few months back. So again, those things work until they don't anymore. And then you have like I would say the more powerful levers, which are financial incentives and social comparison. Financial incentives is pretty much, it's the candy bar story. If you behave well, you're going to get your candy bar. So it's like, how do you work on bonus schemes inside companies? How do you create rules where, subsidies or that are actually rewarding the green over the brown? And that's what Chris has done with the quota, the carbon quotas he's done in his company. And there's, many ways to do that. But that's I think, a compelling story for a lot of people that wouldn't have the courage otherwise to change a way of working, is to financially reward. And then social comparison. We're more likely to change our behaviors not because of something we know. I mean, a lot of people here drink sugary drinks or have alcohol. We all know it's bad for our health, but we're still doing it. But once your kids or your family or your friends or something you can compare with, if you're a CEO, another CEO, start changing his behavior, you're more likely to change your own behavior as well. So you need to work on those kind of comparables. And that's what we've done with the schools ranking, which was the first time we actually published a new kind of ranking to compare the schools together on the way they train students. And the schools, they were compelled to follow because the competitors were doing it. So all in all, those are the kinds of levers that you can use, and I think that all of them are important, all of them make sense. But you need to use them, at different moments. But always make sure that whatever the story you're telling, you connect with the person's feelings, because in the end, we connect with our emotions. Emotions are the things that guide our decisions. So that's what I would say overall.
Thank you.
Can I just say something real quick? Just based on what he was just saying, I think it's worth asking, what is the resistance to being in a new narrative or a new story? Mm-hmm. And usually it's because you feel like you're going to lose something. You emotionally feel like you're going to lose something, right? And usually that thing is power, right? So when we're asking ourselves, when we are trying to change a system, what story of the people we're trying to convince, what story are they in? If I'm in a story that I'm alone, I can only count on myself, there's scarcity in the world, there's only so much, I got to go grab it. And what I do get, I have to own it. I have to have dominion over it, right? Is a very different story than there's abundance. There's enough for everybody. I am not alone. I am in community. Well, how does that change the story of all these systems, right? If I'm in that story. So part of it is thinking about what story we're trying to move to where, and what am I gaining by changing stories. So I often think of, like, I'm a frog on a little leaf, and that next leaf is a little bit far, and I don't know, I'm okay where I am. That's why dominant stories are so powerful. Most people don't want to jump leaves, right? And we have to think a little bit about what people are gaining by taking the risk, because it is a risk to go against the grain, right? And as we talked about, I think Andrew was talking about failing systems. If we have failing systems, and as I was speaking before, if we have failing systems, we have failing stories. We need to replace failing stories to come with the new systems, and they have to offer a different version of events, which isn't I'm alone, there's scarcity, I have to own things around me as the way for me to protect myself and be okay.
So is this about inviting people in even when they're scared and creating safe spaces and ways of actually connecting across difference? I'm thinking even situations where you might have to speak truth to power. it's not always easy for power to accept that truth. There's a way to actually be empathetic towards the other and speak even their language. Is that something that we need to be doing more and maybe aren't doing enough of in order to actually create more of a rising tide, to invite people in that we might not agree with, meet them where they are, and change as a global whole, including everyone?
I can answer that one really quickly, just because it's right with what I was just saying. Yeah, I think we have to offer a story of connection, ultimately. And a story of connection, I would say less space, more brave spaces, right? It's about, polarized debate is the worst thing for all our systems change work. If we are in conversation, we are doing this together, we have a shot at actually making the change happen. If we're in the corners, then it's that fight, the debate, that becomes the thing, right? If we give people opportunities to engage across the, the audience that I talk to a lot, I call the curious but skeptical, the aligned but hesitant. That's who I'm trying to draw in. I want to create an experience, an emotional experience with the story to be able to engage in the systems work.
I mean, fear, it makes you feel connected to something that you don't want to lose, right? So people connect to change when they realize how that change is affecting their lives. So you need to make sure that you make it personal, and fear makes it personal in a way because you realize that you may lose something that you actually want to protect. And that fear shouldn't be, you shouldn't stay with that. The problem is that then you create these pathways where people just feel like they can just surrender because it's anyway, there's no way we can get out of it, so I'm just not going to do anything and I'm just going to stay in that situation. You need to also move from that fear to a place where you feel that even though you don't have all the visibility, all the solutions in your mind, you feel that you are at least contributing. And I think that's the importance of starting something, understanding that you in your own position, in your own role, you can also have an influence that is positive and that will leave the fear aside and start, fill you with a sense of, I would say, not accomplishment, but the feeling that at least you're doing something on your end, and that's gonna help.
I'm noticing our time. We're slowly running out, so I'm gonna put in a rapid fire question for all three of you to wrap up here. For our audience, if there's one way that our audience can make a shift in the narratives that they tell or participate in today, what would you suggest? Where should they start?
Start with empathy. Not sympathy, but empathy. So sympathy and empathy are, very different. So sympathy is, oh, you are in a well, oh, I'll leave you there. And empathy is, actually going into the well and helping the other person out. So if you see, and that's what we see everywhere, from our workplace to, to the leadership decisions we make. So you could be having a female colleague and, the kids are having exams tomorrow and you can say, oh, it's your kids' exams tomorrow. Or you can say, oh, it's your kids' exams tomorrow, why don't you go and work from home? And we'll bring in a policy which actually allows people, to work from home, to have, to provide for their families. So a lot of adults are actually not caregivers also, right? So how do you incorporate that in policy? So empathy, if you start with empathy, that empathy can translate into a lot of policies. It can translate into, how we speak to the people we work with. I think for me, empathy is the starting point, and clearly not sympathy, but yes, empathy is the starting point. That should be the word, yes.
Okay, so Kamna, empathy. Kevin, what would you say?
I would say understand what is your role in the system. Who are you? What is your position? And who can you influence? That's the first thing, because if you try to go way beyond your reach, then you can feel also inefficient because it's too big, it's too much. So first understand what is your role in the system and who are the people that you have direct access to. And if you don't like your role, just change it. No one cared about my opinion about those topics 7 years ago, right? So just, nothing is permanent. So that's really what I invite you to do is really question what's your background, what's your knowledge, what's your expertise, and how can this help other people to take the right decisions that will help other people take the right decisions. And then if that position doesn't fulfill you, just change it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and what I would say is align your systems work with storytelling, bring the storytelling for some, maybe from the margins a little bit more to the center of your work, and find storytellers to do that with, who are very good at that sort of thing. And I think another thing that's great about being here is expand your networks. We've heard a little bit like, climate, health, education, all these issues are not systems that exist without each other, and the stories that go along with those systems are also interconnected. Expand beyond. You have some time here to do that. Don't do this alone. You can't. It's way too much work. It's way too hard. It's overwhelming, I know, but everything you need to get started and to do more is right in this room. It's right with the people who are here, who you can talk to. I'm here, you can talk to me, and you have 3 days, I think, in front of you, which I will also be doing the exact same thing, and introducing myself to do this work together.
Thank you. I think that is a beautiful place to wrap up our panel. Thank you so much for the calls to action and for all the wisdom. Let's thank our panelists. And I'm going to thank our wonderful audience for the fantastic time we've had together here, for your attention. I'm sure some of you will be moving on to other sessions. Please remember where we started this session, which is you have the power to change the narratives that you tell, that you perpetuate, and you have the ability to write a new story. So I encourage you all to go out and do that. Thank you.